Picking up from last episode where we ended up at 2,906 score, we continue our push to 3,000 Mythic Plus score, so here is what I learned. I do just want to remind you guys I stream most of my keys over at my Twitch, so be sure to drop me a follow over there. It's the first link in the description. This first key that we ran was a 22 underrot, which in theory should be a pretty free key, although it was a tyrannical week and some of those bosses do become flat walls. But the run started off pretty pog at the start. We were chaining a lot of the pulls. None of the classes in our group actually need to reset in between pulls, so we could just keep it nice and fast. And then we got to the infamous Cragmore. Now, I'm not trying to make excuses, but prior to this, I did just get raided by my good friend Mazarok, so I was a bit caught up and distracted with that, though I was still getting my fair share of ticks, I feel like. Little did I know, when I was on my way to reposition, I got sniped and intercepted by Cragmore's charge just after the tantrum. But the group did end up wiping to the sheer amount of ticks that spawned anyway. So we wiped up, came back again, this time without Lust, and the running theme here is that the boss is always easier to kill without Lust and it also dies faster. I don't know how it happens, but it always does. So we take out Cragmore. Some more scuffage on Xancha. The tank was pretty low when the boss was casting Festering Harvest, and it looks like we just missed out on the Spirit Link totem as well, so unfortunately the tank did fall over and we soon followed. So again, we run back Xancha, and I don't know what it is about this first overlap, but for some reason I'm the only person in the game that can't actually execute it properly. It didn't help that I was still on these little red mushrooms here, which are actually elevated off the ground, so when I was running to the right after the upheaval was placed, I actually flew off and was unable to move back left to save myself from the mushroom on the right. So I fell into that, took a massive burst of damage, and then also ran straight into a spore, so I got taken out at the start. The guys rezzed me up, which was lucky because later in the fight I had to do a little PogChamp save for the group with Turtle running through the extra mushrooms that were still active. And then finally we took out Xancha. Moving on to the last boss, we were really tight on the timer here. As you can see, we have 13 deaths overall in this key, so it was not a clean run by any means, but with 20 seconds left, the last two ads spawned. Obviously, the Titan Keeper takes one of them out, we focus the other one, and then we take out the last boss. Not really sure how we time this. I mean, this kind of goes to show how free Underrot is. On a 22 Tyrannical, you shouldn't be able to wipe twice, maybe even 3 times in the dungeon and still time it. But somehow we did, and we got 11 score out of it, so now we're sat at 2,917. Next, we move on to a 22 Hordes of Infusion, which is by far my least favorite dungeon this season, I'm pretty sure. Saying that though, I was pumping in this key, the tank was pumping in this key, everybody was bloody pumping in this key, even the healer was pumping the heals. This meant that on Kajin I felt super safe at all times because the healer was just able to deal with all the incoming damage. So we pretty safely took out the third boss. This was a super clean key, so there's not too much to show except on this last little gauntlet bit on the last boss where you run back. The warrior did get taken out by one of the tsunamis, unfortunately, which I don't like to pass the blame, but it did sort of maybe, potentially, probably, definitely cause us not to 2-chest this key because we missed the 2-chest timer by about 4 seconds, which is really unfortunate. But you can't really complain about timing a 22, especially when it's a Halls Tyrannical. So we got another 16 score out of that, sitting at 2,933 now. Back in Underrot, we wanted a redeemer for the previous key that we had just suffered through. We took most of the same group from the last key. We just swapped out the healer this time because unfortunately he had to go. Somehow, as we were going down the bridge on the left, I caught an incorporeal behind me, turned around with a little 180. My trick-shotting days back in the day on MW2 really saved me here. Threw a freezing trap and trapped the incorp so we didn't have to deal with that. First boss went smoothly. As always, it's a pretty free boss, right? Then we move on to the Cragmore trash area. As you can see here, I'm just showing off BM sustained AoE damage. It's truly bonkers. And also, I would arguably say is one of the best classes for Cragmore, as we're one of the only specs in the game that can have full uptime on the boss at all times. Though I'm sure in those higher tyrannical keys, we are a hunter at the end of the day, so we would probably just fall over. But with Cragmore this time, we were super clean on the ticks. Everybody was doing their job, so that we had no problems with that. Finishing the fight off at around 120k DPS here is really not bad, and the boss goes down with no problems. On to Xancha then. I think the healer was trying to just be efficient and clear some of the mushrooms. Don't know if he pre-bubbled because I saw him clearing on the other side. Then he walks behind me, runs through a few more mushrooms and just falls over. So we had a good chuckle at that. Again, don't know if he had bubble up or if he was planning to dispel himself. I don't really know what was going on there, but it was a good laugh anyway. We just CR'd him and carried on with the fight. Finally, onto the last boss, we take out the Unbound Abomination with about 10 seconds left on the 2-chest. So we do end up 2-chesting the 23, which felt really nice. Even though it is underrot, it still feels really good to be 2-chesting a plus 23, especially on a tyrannical week. Next, we had a Nelthros, which unfortunately I completely forgot to record because I wasn't actually streaming this one. But I did hit my Nvidia shadow play at the end, so we've got the footage of the end. There wasn't really much to note during this key, honestly. We had a few silly deaths here and there. We went right at the start to do the chains, and unfortunately a few of us did end up failing the chains, so we wasted a bit of time actually having to DPS the first pack. But as you can see, we were pretty ahead on the timer. We've got about 3 minutes left for when we kill the final boss. But that does leave me confident for timing this dungeon on a higher key, potentially a 25, maybe even a 26, but the damage output from the bosses, especially in this dungeon, could become a problem in those 26s, so I expect a few more deaths in there. But the key was really smooth other than that. So we take out the last boss and get a 23 score from this. I guess I just had a lower Nelthorus key before, so that explains the massive score gains here, pushing us up to 2970. 30 score off of 3k, and at this point I was like, whoa, I thought I was going to need a load of keys on Fortified to actually get 3k, but it seems like I could even push it this week. I did low-key want to wait to bump up a load of my Fortified keys anyway, one because it would be easier because a lot of them are just sat at 20s anyway, but it would look weird timing 24s and 23s on Tyrannicals and then just having a load of 20s on Fortified. So we continue the push here on the Tyrannical week into a 24 Neltharian's lair. At the start, the tank missed a crocodile on the left. I didn't realize that we didn't get that one, so I had to run back to the start and grab one of those crocs, which caused me to lose out on a load of DPS on this first pack, unfortunately, but I don't think I would have been competing with a fire mage. Saying that though, we didn't end this pool too badly. Onto the first boss, Rockmora. Obviously, in these higher tyrannical keys, this is all about killing the ads before he does his shatter ability. We got quite unlucky with a tick spawning just before a shatter. I think the tick spawn every 5% health maybe. Could be making that up, I don't know. But it seemed to spawn really soon before the shatter actually went off. So we just popped a defensive before the shatter went off and we were all fine. Again, I apologize. I didn't get much footage of this key. I apparently just forgot to record it again, but in the future, I will make sure to record all of my keys. We get onto the last boss with about 7 minutes left, so we were really slamming this key and we had a lot of time spare for the last boss, so all we had to do was play defensively and make it work, which is exactly what I did. If you guys did catch the last episode, if you didn't, I'll leave the link in the description. But I was talking about the positioning on this last boss in Neltharian's lair. The ad that the boss spawns will always spawn to the front left of the boss, so you want your healers and DPS to stack up in that same area, so when the ad spawns, it spawns straight onto a crystal spike that you've baited perfectly. This means that you can start the damage amp phase straight away, but also, more importantly, it means that you won't take a load of damage while the ad is running about, because every time the ad moves or the boss moves, they deal massive AoE damage, so you won't have to use defensives while the ad is running over to the pillar that you baited in absolute Narnia. If you do fail to bait the ad properly, it is not the end of the world. Just make sure to use a defensive and you should be fine. There's not too much outgoing damage apart from when the boss or ad moves, so you don't really need your defensives in other parts of the fight. So we end up taking out the last boss. We get 11 score from this 24 Neltharian's lair, and now we are sat 19 score away from 3k. At 2981. Moving on to my first attempt at a 25 this season, and it is a brave one at that. We have a 25 Brackenhide Hollow. We had a few silly deaths on the first boss. I think one was to Gash Frenzy and the other was to Earth Bolt. In these higher tyrannical keys, you really need to be interrupting every single one of those Earth Bolts. They really hurt. I think most groups have started focusing down Trick Totem these days to negate that damage, because Gash Frenzy is actually pretty easily dealt with. Just pop a defensive whenever you know it's coming out. I'll normally pop a Survival of the Fittest on the first one, and then pop a turtle on the second one. If I do need that extra healing, I'll exil or I will health pop. But as you can see, we're in the tree forest area now, which is probably one of my favorite places in any of the dungeons in season 2. Just lots of big AoE is always a good time. These keys were before the recent change to the dungeon where my pets are still getting stunned by the AoE stomp from the big tree. But fortunately, Blizzard picked up on it and now pets don't get stunned by the AoE stomp anymore. The other two bosses went completely fine. As I'm sure we're all aware, in these high tyrannical keys, it's all about this last boss, and not even about the last boss, it's about the last boss's totems. BM Hunter and Ret Paladin was definitely an interesting comp going into this. We just did not have the burst damage for each of the totems. The Ret Paladin, I think, would maybe delete every other one, maybe every third one with his wings. I deal more overall consistent damage to the totems, but BM doesn't have that short window of burst, which is unfortunate. I have my Death Chakram on a 45-second cooldown that increases my damage by 10%, but it's really nothing to write home about. I've got to kind of pray that the rest of my group gets the totem down to about 20% health so that I can kill shot and finish it off. Unfortunately, we weren't successful with this, and we took one stack of the totem, and then that just caused us to wipe in the end. This boss gets so overwhelming, especially towards the end, if you even let one of the rotting burst casts go off, so we just unfortunately ticked out. Not much we could really do, to be honest. I could have been a bit more savvy with my cooldowns potentially, and maybe the rep palette as well could have, but I honestly don't know. They were probably playing just fine. It just feels bad when it's probably your comp that is the downfall of your key, and even worse once you played a 40-minute dungeon pretty cleanly and then you just wipe on the last boss. It doesn't feel great. That being said, we did run it back on the 24 to have the exact same thing happen. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage of that key. I thought I did, but exactly the same thing happened. We just wiped on the last totems. Here you can see the totem damage from the last boss. I did about 10 million to them, and the Ret Paladin did about 6 million to them, but this is the problem. I'm dealing overall more damage to them, but every other one or every third one, Tony was absolutely deleting the totem. So he was probably carrying more. I was just hitting the totems for the same amount every single time, which caused me to do more overall damage to them. So really unfortunate we didn't get to time either one of these keys. We even had a beacon on the healer, so we were deleting one of them at least. We just did end up getting a stack, and then that would slowly tick us all out or kill us on the next boss's cast. Moving on to our final key for this episode, then we've got the 22 freehold. This was on the weekly reset, so we are now on a fortified, afflicted, and raging week. As you can see, me and the Frost Mage pumping on this first pack. We need to focus all of our DPS into the Enforcer because he is like the one big scary mob in here. Those Shattering Bellows really do hurt in these higher fortified keys. Near the first boss, where we're taking out the last pack to actually spawn the boss, the healer decides to stand in a brutal backhand. To be honest, if you do look closely, the healer does look like he's outside of the brutal backhand range, but there is just a little bit of a tail off at the end where the animation sort of fades, but you are still stood in it, so he unfortunately died to that. Not really a big issue though, because the enforcers are pretty much dead, so we took out the rest of the pack and moved on to the first boss. On this first boss, as a BM hunter, I like to be as useful as possible, so I try and bait the parrot poop as best as I can. If you wait for the parrot's dive bomb and let him charge across the arena, then go and run over to him, he will always poo on you as long as you're the closest person to him. Just keep on moving and you will take minimal damage from it. So we take out the first boss, and then the mage does the skip on the enforcer on the bridge. He does die to it, but he is within resurrection range, so it's not too much of an issue. And since then, I've actually learned how to do this on the hunter. I was a bit sketched out at doing it at first. I didn't want to end up bricking the key because of it, but now I can pretty much safely do it on the hunter every time. It's not that hard. Across the bridge, we do some pretty standard pulls, and this is where the cracks start to show. The tank does fall over. VDH can be squishy if not played optimally. And then because the tank died, me and the evoker fell over. I did have turtle up, so I could have been a bit quicker on the trigger and maybe lived. But I don't really expect my tank to fall over in this pack. I'm not really going to lie to you. And then after this, the key started to go downhill pretty quickly. The tank was literally running about all over the place, not being able to make up his mind about where he wanted to go. On the second boss, we did the usual pull the trash onto Raoul once Eudora dies. Afflicted went off in the back, which was unfortunate, and then the Resto Druid actually got harpooned into the barrel smash. What a combo that was. He got absolutely PvP'd on, and he fell over. He can't really do anything about that, unfortunately. If he was really gaming, he maybe could have wild charged to me, but I don't even know if Resto Druids play with a wild charge talent. But yeah, that was just unfortunate timing there. Then we go over to the Ring of Booty. I think the mage stood in the going bananas here, so he dropped down to about 14% health and then just ticked out to something else. Not sure what it was, maybe a ricocheting throw. And then this is where we realize it's pretty much the end of the key. The tank runs off to do a pull and instantly falls over, which it looks like he literally died to one mob, so that is interesting. He definitely had his back to the mob, so it could have been that, or he just got hit by something else that I didn't see. We get a CR on him, but then the Resto Druid gets taken out because of that. He gets the aggro. The mage falls over shortly after that. Obviously, he's not getting healed at this point, so we're all in a state of panic now. And Afflicted's going off in the back. The Evoker probably didn't see it. You can see it's behind their camera, but also everything is going to shit, so you can't really blame them for not focusing on Afflicted at this time. We're all just trying to live here. The Resto Druid dies on his way back over. God knows what it was, maybe an Iron Tide Crusher, because I'm pretty sure they have True Sight, which I imagine he was probably trying to stealth past. So we're without a healer for even longer now. We did live this pool for a substantial amount of time without a healer, but the mage makes it back. He instantly falls over, so that's a tilter right there. Exactly the same goes for the Resto Druid, and then we all slowly fall over. We did our best to live. That was probably a good 30 seconds where we were just trying to live without half of our group there. We come back, the key is definitely dead at this point, so the tank pulls the turtle man with all the ads in the back, instantly falls over, so does the mage, and that is the key for sure. That's a GG, go next. So that is where we end this episode. I'm sorry that we didn't time the last couple of keys, but that is just the way it goes sometimes. Sometimes you're not as lucky with the pugs. So we're sat at 2,981 score, which is 19 score off of 3,000 score. Like I said in the last episode, I am going to continue this series on to 3.1k, so let me know if you're excited for that. Leave a like down below if you did enjoy this video and subscribe to your boy, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.